Welcome to Off the Post. I'm Russ Cohen. We've got Anthony Mingioni. And how are you?
Doing all right, Russell. How are you doing this fine morning?
Doing pretty good. Pretty good. I'm in Cleveland at the moment, so just spent the night. And Mike Augello, how are you?
Home of the Shane Malloy's favorite Cleveland Browns. I'm doing well, Russell. I'm a little tired after being on the road back from Toronto last night.
Listen, you drove from Toronto. I drove from Michigan. Come on, man.
That's why I said it.
And we have Jeff Marek from the Jeff Marek Show and 32 Thoughts podcast.
Oh, and Mike, thanks for repping the merch. And by the way, I saw Shane Malloy yesterday at the
we heard
conference. Yeah, what a delightful guy. That guy's way.
I don't know. Don't say delightful.
No, I like Shane. No, I like Shane. First of all, he's way too smart. Like he's way too smart for me to hang out with.
He thinks he's too smart. There's a difference.
He's legit. No, there's some guys that fake the funk. I might be one of them. But Shane's way. I was talking to him yesterday, and I'm just like, you know that moment where you realize, yeah, you probably shouldn't be in this conversation. This guy's way too smart for you. That was me with Shane yesterday.
I have that conversation with him once a week at least, sometimes twice a week. So I'm aware.
And he regrets it immediately afterwards.
No. So let's no, Shane's a good friend. Let's get things started. So Jeff, since I am in Cleveland, who do you feel is the biggest snub for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for a band? Who should be in there in your estimate?
So I knew you were going to ask this, so I kind of snooped around because I don't think I would have been able to give you a legitimate answer off the top of my head. So I'm glad that Mikey sort of heads me up on this one a little bit here because I don't want to be frivolous on your show. I think the interesting thing about it is, doesn't it sort of come down to, like for me, my answer, I'll look at the list of quote unquote snubs and I'll just go, okay, which is my favorite band of these?
Right.
Because I don't know that I can give proper historical context.
No, it's about your favorite band. Like for me,
because it's not like, okay, this band was important because of this and this,
No, it doesn't. Like for me, it would be Styx. I love Styx. They're very. They've sold a million trillion records. They're still at it, and so for me, it's easy.
Whenever I think of the band Styx, I always think of the TV show Solid Gold because it seemed like Styx was always playing on Solid Gold. You like that one, hey, Mikey? Got you. A little trip down memory lane there, Mikey.
Stereo, Marilyn McCoo.
Yeah, she's great. For me, it's Iron Maiden.
Okay.
I look at that list. It's funny. I was just listening to Hallowed Be Thy Name yesterday as I went to Hockey Night in Canada. It's a little glimpse into my pathetic life. I think a lot of us have always wanted soundtracks for moments in our lives. Mm-hmm. And so when I go to the parking garage Saturday night before doing Hockey Night in Canada, I'm such a loser, guy. I can't believe I'm admitting this. I'm such a loser. I sit in my car, but if I gather my bag and all that, put my coat on, and before I go up to the second floor and then head over to the Hockey Night studios, I always pick like a different song, not necessarily different, but like a theme. It's like a soundtrack song because Hockey Night in Canada is like a really big deal, and we sort of in a sacred spot. And I always want to have like a song that gets me in the mood. Get there. And yesterday was Hallowed. I don't know why. Yesterday I had Hallowed Be Thy Name by Iron Maiden.
Okay. I saw them once. They were good.
I've never seen them.
You've never seen them?
I've seen I saw Deep Purple in '86. I saw Black Sabbath in '86. I've seen tons of bands of that genre. So I grew up a fan of all of them.
Yeah, and they're touring now. They're still on tour.
They're touring now, and they're all 80 years old. And Steve Harris is still awesome, and Bruce Dickinson, that beautiful little elf, is still bouncing all around the stage and flying planes and drinking beers and throwing darts and still hitting the high notes. And I still haven't seen them. It's
wow.
I'll go you one better, Jeff. My best friend from high school. He was flying back from England on a commercial flight about 15 years ago, and the band was on the flight with him, a couple three or four rows from him, and he's a big Iron Maiden fan, so he was in absolute glory. But to answer Russ's question,
hang on, did he talk to them? Did he go? Please tell me.
They were fantastic.
Wait, Jeff answered it. I didn't ask you.
I know, but
go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm still pissed off. I'm still pissed off the air supply is not in. But
Mike's my attorney, Russ, and Anthony. Every now and then he'll speak for me and say things like, "Well, what my client is really trying to say here, Your Honor." And I listen, and I like any band that can make, because I'm an English major and I spend a lot of times reading books and writing papers. Anyone that can take Crime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge and turn it into a kick-ass, like bajillion minute long tune and make it one of the coolest things in hard rock
Before Mike
history.
answers, the only thing I will say, just to show you the loser that I am, I used to have Urgent at the Foreigner song as on my ringtone, right? And my wife said to me one day, like, asked me, why do you have that? I'm like, because anybody who calls me, it's urgent. Like, don't you get it? And she goes, no, you're not that important. Change that.
Oh, no way. That's glorious. You know what? Actually, hang on. You know who I might want to put in there just because I have it and it goes through my head every single day. You may not know the name, but you know the song. Terry Bush.
What's the song?
The theme from The Littlest Hobo, Maybe Tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
Just for that one beautiful piece of music.
That's a different Hall of Fame.
That's a flashback to the Merrick. That's a flashback to the Merrick versus Bushinsky.
Yes, it is. It is.
Please, no. Russ, you want me to
Jay
go?
Jay Woodcroft and The Littlest
No,
Hobo.
you can go first, Mike.
Okay. Jeff.
Yeah.
I'll just say simply, what's wrong with the Toronto Maple Leafs?
It's so funny. Observers of this team, followers of this team, and for good reason, sort of exist in this constant state of panic. They have this sort of Lady Macbeth wandering through the halls, wringing her hands every night about this team. First of all, I'm of the opinion that Maple Leafs fans and Maple Leafs observers have no idea how to enjoy hockey. It makes them very uncomfortable. Their default state is panic, and their default feeling is being nervous and anxious. But it's because the team has always given them reason to.
They're waiting for failure. They're waiting for failure.
Yeah, I know. It's certainly true. I mean, no team is without its flaws. Certainly, the short answer is they probably need one more defenseman. And they need their goaltenders to be healthy. Like, I don't think the Maple Leafs are a team that need elite level goaltending to be successful. We've seen that with them before. I think they're a team that's closer to the Colorado Avalanche than the Edmonton Oilers, where, if the Oilers aren't getting sweet goaltending, as much as they have nuclear missiles up front and can really do a lot of damage, they still need someone back there that can make saves.
Yeah.
I don't think the Maple Leafs are like that. They're not one of those teams. So I still think this is a squad that needs one more defenseman. I don't subscribe to they have to move one of the biggies. They have to move. Like, that's a competitive advantage that you have. I'm not one of these people that feel that there's only one way that you construct a successful roster and that's it. I think there are a lot of different ways that you can win in hockey. And I think the one thing that you do need to have along the way is the one thing all of us, I'm guilty of it too, because like many of us, I want to pretend that I understand everything and can explain everything. But I think that there's an element that every team needs along the way, and that's luck. Like, it really is. Like, no one's doing anything without a little bit of luck along the way. And for the Maple Leafs, and part of it is their own demise and their own. You look at the last COVID season. That Game 7 against Montreal. That was a team that just froze. Right? Like, that wasn't luck. That was a team that just froze. And after, Jack Campbell, it's in that bad Brendan Gallagher goal, the team completely tightens up. But still, like, along the way, and you might say that luck is a matter of, like, the draws that they've had and how many times they've had to face teams like the Boston Bruins, and they're stuck in this ultra competitive division with, killers all around them. Not unlike, the Blue Jays forever, being in the same division as, historically, triumphant New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox. And I know, Mike, you throw in your Yankees all the time.
Listen, the Yankees haven't won in a really long time. Put your arms down.
But it's the same thing. Like, playing in the AL East as a Jays fan, it's just like, please, can we play in another division?
Yeah.
Please let them. And I kind of look at the Maple Leafs and go, like, man, they're surrounded by killers. So I think a lot of what's happened with the Maple Leafs, sure, a lot of it has been their own doing. Sometimes, we've seen games where and maybe the best example was this season against the Arizona Coyotes, where I don't think I've ever seen a team who's achieved so little play so arrogantly against a team that they looked at as inferior and were almost embarrassed to be on the ice with. Like that is one major fault of Toronto. Like they'll go in there and go to Carolina, knock them out. They'll beat Boston on a Saturday night in Hockey Night in Canada. They'll play the Arizona Coyotes. They'll have that disastrous Western road trip. Teams like the Anaheim Ducks, and just get dusted because there still is that arrogance, almost as if they feel it's not right that they should be on the ice with teams that the league is deemed inferior to them. So a long-winded answer of saying they need luck and they need to grow up the act.
Jeff, wanted to talk to you about, obviously, this weekend. It was some interesting moments with Flyers head coach John Tortorella. Of course, we saw what happened. Obviously, first time he's pulled the not going to show up after a post-game press conference. Brad Shaw had to take the questions. And then he comes back on Sunday. He comes back Saturday. He's asked about it and tells the press corps, "It's none of your business why I was out." So we know, obviously, there's going to be a likely conversation with the NHL about that. Now, my question for you is this: it with two emotional games coming, the last two games you have at Columbus for obvious reasons for John Tortorella, and then you're following that up on after that with Claude Giroux's homecoming to Philadelphia, his first game in Philadelphia since he was traded. My question for you is: was this kind of your classic Tortorella? This is a strategic deflection to put the attention on him and away from the players in this circumstance, because it's an interesting time for him to do that when you notice the two games that are coming up here. So I wanted to kind of get your take. Sure. That you think this was a tactical move on his part and willing to take and basically kind of being almost like a bullet sponge for his players.
Sure. I don't think that at this point we can be surprised or feign outrage when Tortorella does this. It's happened, all throughout his career in the NHL. Sometimes he does it tactically. I think sometimes he just does it legitimately, and he's just like fed up and doesn't want to deal with us and doesn't want to see us. And I do understand that. I'll tell you what, Anthony. The only time that it really bothered me was when he was in Columbus. Like when he would do it when he was in New York, okay. Do it in Vancouver, okay. I don't even mind that he does it in Philadelphia. These are established, really good hockey markets and aren't going to be damaged if a coach has either a temper tantrum or just doesn't want to deal with the media. Like they're not going to be damaged at all. The only place that it bothered me was Columbus, because that's still a very sensitive hockey market in the NHL and can go, either way financially, depending on how the team does. And they're fighting in a really tough, sports space to get eyeballs, and you really don't need the coach pulling that type of act, dusting off me. That was the only. Vancouver can handle it. If Torts is going to have a temper tantrum, that's going to happen to the Canucks. Ditto for Rangers and ditto for the Phillies. They'll all be fine. Those are long-standing stuff. I just didn't like it in Columbus. I think that John Tortorella is flat out one of the smartest coaches in hockey, and I think John knows exactly what he's doing. After the Columbus game, and again, we don't know. And there have been some things that I've learned about John, which do help me explain a lot of his behavior. It's nothing that I'm allowed to share, was told to me in confidence, which makes me understand him a little bit more and give him some slack. I know at the surface level, it may look like, okay, John's just being an a-hole. Like what's with this guy? But there's a lot more depth there. Perhaps it'll all, make it in his book if he ever decides to write one. I really hope he does, because it's been a fascinating career. But I don't think that Tortorella does much, if anything, in his life frivolously. So his behavior at press conferences, one, no one should be surprised. No one can complain. This is John Tortorella. When you buy that ticket and get on the ride, that this is going to be the roller coaster you go on. And two, I think that everything that Tortorella does is deliberate and probably, even if not like really well thought out or thought out for a long time, at least in John's mind, there is some logic behind it. Whether he ever decides to share it with us is another thing altogether. But, Anthony, to answer your question, again, a long-winded white boy, man, I suck up all the oxygen on the show when I come on. I don't think John does anything without really thinking about it.
The voice in John Tortorella's head. That's something I don't want to think about. All right.
I do. Honestly, I think it's
one.
I think he's, as much as people, I've had it with this guy, I can't take this guy, the arrogance. No, I think he's one of the most interesting guys in the league, and always has been. And I think the league is better when there are more colorful people in it. Like
I just think the title of his book will be like "Hockey is a Doggy Dog World." I think it'll.
And he loves dogs.
Right?
No. The title of his book will be Larry Brooks, I Hate You.
Well, he's not going to give Larry that much,
but not your little dog too.
Right. All right. So Jeff,
yeah, Russ.
I think things have quieted down a little on the Patrick Kane front, but I still believe he'll get traded. I think he's the big fish out there, and I think he wants to wait until the deadline, maybe because he wants to make sure that Chicago is not going to be that good or spend his last few moments there. So, who do you look as the front runner? I know a team like the Rangers would probably interest him.
Yep.
What do you think?
The two that I think of are the Rangers and the Colorado Avalanche. Those are the two that jump to mind right away. Having said that, I wonder about Boston too. I do wonder about the Boston Bruins. Like there's an element of, and we see this in Pittsburgh too. There's a couple of teams here that have sort of kept the band together a little bit and taken one more shot at it.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh Penguins are clearly one of those teams, and the Boston Bruins are too. And I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen to Patrice Bergeron after this season. No one, we hope that he stays. We hope that David Krejci's still here for a long time, but we don't know. We don't know what that squad's going to look like. So I wonder about, the last hurrah with this band. So I would wonder about the Boston Bruins as well. But right out of the gate, like, I can't hot take this one for you. Like I look at the Rangers and I say, well, it's the Rangers first of all, and big names become available. Plus, there's already the battery with Artemi Panarin, and we've seen what that's been able to, what those two have been able to do. But I think that to your previous point, I think you're bang on. I think he takes his time and he looks at the landscape when it is time to go. There's no point in doing it now. There's no point in speculating now. A lot of things can happen: losing streaks, coaching changes, injuries, you name it. Like things can go sideways and can steer into the ditch. So if you're Patrick Kane, I think you do take your time. You wait to deadline, and you do this in concert with the Blackhawks. But the two that I would imagine, Avalanche, who very quietly are kind of in on everybody. So maybe I should throw the Carolina Hurricanes in there too, because they're in on everybody too when they become available. But I'll say Rangers and Avs look like right now as we speak on Sunday morning, November 13th. Those would be the two that I would look at.
Jeff, to continue along with the trade scenarios, I know that you chronicled on the most recent 32 Thoughts podcast, the discussion regarding St. Louis, their struggles, their defense losing Perunovich, losing Torrey Krug for a time, and that they're Doug Armstrong's looking for defense. Thomas Chabot gets hurt last night against Philadelphia. We don't know how long that's going to be, but we know that Pierre Dorian was already looking for defense, and you just mentioned Toronto with the Muzzin situation. The issue I have, the Ethan Bear thing was an outlier. The teams are not, even teams that are going to be in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes, teams are not trading defensemen in the second week of November. They normally will wait until December, January, walking up toward the deadline. So I don't know how these teams are going to get that defenseman that they're looking for unless they overpay. What do you
I agree with that. I think that I think the Ethan Bear situation was a unique one. Like there are players that we know that are going to get traded. Like there's a couple of defensemen we all expect eventually, and we think this season once he can demonstrate that he can play, Jacob Chychrun is getting moved. Yes. Now Chychrun's name has been attached to various times to the St. Louis Blues as well. I don't know if that would surprise anybody. It probably shouldn't. Ditto for the Ottawa Senators. Ottawa was looking for a defenseman going back to the draft last year when we all thought that the Ottawa Senators were going to get Mackenzie Weegar. That was the hunt. But you're right. Like, and the other one is Shane Gostisbehere. I think it's not exactly a secret that Gostisbehere is going somewhere. That's probably closer to a trade deadline move, I would expect. I think Jacob Chychrun can happen. The moment that he's deemed healthy, that GMs have seen enough play out of him that they're confident saying, okay, he's healthy, he can move. Now let's talk about what this package is going to look like. And to my knowledge and belief, the package hasn't wavered. It's essentially various versions of 3 first-round picks, whether it's prospects or whether it's players or the actual pick themselves. And there is still a pretty sizable marketplace for Chychrun. I still wonder about Los Angeles. I think that might make a ton of sense. I do, to your point as well, wonder about the St. Louis Blues there and Ottawa. And there's always, it's interesting too. Columbus has always kind of been around Chychrun as well. And even though it looks like they're in the Bedard sweepstakes right now with Werenski, this isn't your strict rental. So I still wonder about them as well. But I think you're right. Like, considering how hot the marketplace is for defensemen, and this is a lesson to every hockey parent out there. If you're a son or daughter, say, because this is true on the women's side as well. I want to play forward. No, you want to be a right shot defenseman. Right. That's what you want to be. You want to be a right shot defenseman. Now, damn it, get out there and patrol the blue line.
Definitely not a goalie.
No. And considering how the league continues to turn itself, to curb rules to encourage goal scoring. But no, I do think that it's going to be tough to get a defenseman right now. Like, there's a lot of teams. I mean, what do we always hear at deadline? What does every team want? Like, whenever, here's a little secret. Whenever all of us are on television and don't have something to say about a team around trade deadline, you know what our default is? They're looking for depth defensemen.
Yep.
Everybody's looking for depth defensemen.
Yeah.
So it's like saying, at the draft, they've decided to take the best player available. Everyone is taking the best player available. Like, that whole drafting for position thing is long gone.
Jeff, my last question for you is just in general. I mean, we obviously focused in on John Tortorella, but, kind of spinning out from that as well. I wanted to get your take so far on, what you've seen from the Flyers. From my perspective in this case, I think, there's been some good developments for some of the young players on their team. Owen Tippett, I think, has been very
big time. That was what I was going to go to, is Owen Tippett. We always just thought, sure, he's got the elite shot. What else is there? There is more there than we initially thought about Owen Tippett. Absolutely.
Yeah, but a lot of this, I believe, is been buoyed by just a tremendous performance in the early season by Carter Hart. And we've also seen in the last 2 games, if Hart is a little bit off. Now, again, he was ill prior to the last 2 games, so he may be a little bit off. I guess, is this sort of performance at the moment sustainable, considering the Flyers have been getting kind of crushed on, certainly on advanced stat numbers? Is this kind of work in progress stuff that we're seeing here, where they can potentially move on, or do you think there's going to be more of a slide back to, to the mean, so to speak?
Depends on how you do. You think that Carter Hart is the next Henrik Lundqvist? Because these are Lundqvist type numbers. Now, Lundqvist was able to do it for his entire career, which makes him one of the greatest goaltenders of all time. If you look at things like, expected goals against, and you look at like how the team performed in front of him, and you look at the workload, like, these are Lundqvist numbers. And these are Shesterkin numbers from last year, where everything around Shesterkin was caving in, but he's like, I got this. I'm keeping us in games. Don't worry. So the question becomes, Connor Hellebuck at times, by the way, has turned in performances like this as well for the Winnipeg Jets. So it's not as if we haven't seen it before. The only question is, can you do this for a season, for a career? We've wondered, at what point is Carter Hart going to, finally plant the flag and demonstrate that he's one of the elite in the NHL? Because potential has always been there, going back to when the Flyers first drafted him. It's not a sexy answer, but my answer is I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know, but like, all I know was like the numbers that he's putting up here. Like, these are First of all, the workload. I looked into this not too long ago. There's only one other goaltender that has a bigger workload than Carter Hart. You know who it is? John Gibson.
Yeah, Gibson
of the Anaheim Ducks. That team just gets caved in every single. And there's John Gibson. Like, the Carter Hart is number 2.
Yeah,
like, and think
I'll
about
tell you what
he's
this
doing.
season reminds me of, Jeff. It reminds me of when Turco was going for the save percentage record, and then he fell. He eventually fell short. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. I think we waited for this. I mean, I really cheer for the guy, because Like, I think he's one of the people that we looked at during COVID and say he was really hurt by it. I think a lot of young players who didn't have families to go to and, just went home and, watched TV and talked to their cat. Like they really felt it mentally. And a lot of kids went through that when you didn't have a family structure to go home to every night. And I think Carter Hart was one of those people and one of those players. So you cheer for guys like that, like that can overcome it. So I hope for his sake and I hope for Philadelphia's sake that finally there's a goalie. Legitimately, we all cross our fingers and say, okay, like, because you know why, Anthony? Because I'm just sick of the story. I'm just sick of the Flyers are good here and here and here and here and here and here and here, and everything's getting undone because they can't get a save. Like I'm sick of the story. I just want that one to end. Park it. Go away. Just like Mike, to your point about the Maple Leafs. I'm sick of the story. Like I'm just done with it. Like let's move on and have a new story here. And for Philadelphia, I'm done with it. They have everything but the goalie story. Now their issues are everywhere else, but now it looks like maybe they have the goaltender here.
All I have to do is copy and paste my last year's article about the Leafs and change the dates and everything. Okay, final thing, Jeff. We are both of a similar age.
Vintage,
yes. And we both grew up watching Boreas Salming. And I last night I saw a tweet from Mike Zeisberger who said, if you didn't have a tear in your eye at the ceremonies on Friday, or I'll apply it to yesterday, you're not human. And I had a tear in my eye. And it's because I grew up thinking that Boreas Salming was the rival of Larry Robinson and Dennis Potvin as being the best defenseman in the NHL. He just didn't win a Norris Trophy like those guys did.
Yes.
And it's absolutely heartbreaking to see a guy who I called a Swedish oak, because he looked like he was at 65. He could go, and I'm sure he would have improved the Leafs blue line. He could have put on
clearly over Justin Hall, Mike. We know you feel that.
Oh yeah. I think of them in the same thought process there, Russ. But it's an absolute tragedy, and I don't think that young people nowadays realize how much of an impact that Boreas Salming was on the NHL.
One of the most important players to ever suit up in the NHL. And we measure toughness in a lot of different ways. And as I get older, I'm of the belief that the toughness that players like Boreas Salming had in the 70s, as I've made the point before, half the league should have been incarcerated in that decade. Oh, yeah. And what Boreas Salming had to endure with the slashes and the high sticks and the punches and the assaults, and we all know about the Mel Bridgman story, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that to me is a more impressive type of toughness than beating someone up or bullying someone. The ability to endure and the ability to survive, and not just survive and just, eke out a meager existence. But don't forget, like, this was the era of, pardon the expression, chicken sweet. Oh, these guys aren't going to be here. We can bully them out of the rink. We're going to, beat them up and they'll never going to come back. Salming kept coming back. Like, there were players that got intimidated. And intimidation is still a thing in the NHL now, but not like it was in the 70s. Not when it was in like the heyday of Boreas Salming. And I'm with you on being, one of the best defensemen, and at times the best defenseman in the NHL. We hadn't seen anyone skate like that, Mike. Like, you look at like long strides, like he galloped, and I don't think we ever, like, the way that he was able to maneuver his body around a puck and around a player, and then was absolutely fearless diving in front of shots. And the pure athleticism, like the stories are legendary. It's funny, I was talking to Gord Stellick about this a couple of days ago, and Gordy was saying, like, we were sort of laughing at, like, here's a guy that would go to morning skate and then would go skiing all afternoon, have a little nap, a meager dinner, and then go to Maple Leaf Gardens, and he would be the best player on the ice. And that was Boreas' day. He was in the era where you use training camp to work off the boiler and get in shape. He showed up and you could light matches off of him. Bounce quarters off his abs. He showed up in tremendous shape, always took care of himself, and was one of the most dignified athletes the city of Toronto has ever seen. Now, the thing about Salming was, like, he went hard in every aspect of his life. On the ice, he worked hard. As far as dedicating himself to athleticism, he worked hard. Off the ice, he worked hard too. And he was kind. He was generous. I've told this story elsewhere. One of my greatest thrills, I think it would have been, Mike, maybe 7 or 8 years old at the west end of the city where Salming lived. My dad would take me skating at High Park, and High Park had this really nice outdoor arena. And I'd want to get there just to play with my dad before everybody else got there. So I'd be there with my dad 7 o'clock in the morning. Everyone started showing up around 8:30 to play shinny. And I just love playing with my dad. One day, Boreas Salming and Jim McKenney, Howie lived not too far from there either, just off of a street called Ellis Avenue. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Boreas Salming and Jim McKenney appear. And I'm like, is that? I remember talking to Dad, is that? And he's like, yeah, that's Boreas Salming and Jim McKenney. And we play they were just going for a skate. And, I later found out that, they hadn't gone home yet and they wanted to have a skate before they went back home. But still, there was little, 7-year-old Jeffy passing a puck around Boreas Salming. It's one of those things, awesome. And I could just imagine my father passed on a few years ago, but I could imagine, as a parent myself of kids that play hockey, I could imagine I never thought about this and until my dad passed, how he would have felt watching his kid even just play shinny and pass the puck with someone like Boreas Salming. I just remember how kind he was and just sublime. And again, I'll underscore this. In that era where we talk about how Schultz and Selesky and Randy Holt and Terry O'Reilly and run down the list of killers in that era, Salming may have been the toughest because he took everything.
He did.
He took all of it from all those guys and never changed his game at all and opened doors for Swedish hockey in the NHL to the point where there was a moment in the NHL where we looked at Peter Forsberg and said, isn't it cool that the best power forward in the NHL is a Swede?
Yeah.
He opened the door for all these guys. And both Friday and Saturday were, grab the tissues nights. The embrace with 27 and 21 was beautiful. And
I can tell you,
same thing.
He definitely opened the door for Ulf Nielsen and Anders Hedberg for sure. Because I was a kid growing up in New York, and that was the honest thing. Was wow, the Rangers assigned 2 of these guys, really?
Yeah.
Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So
it's really cool. And then, in tries, I was too young for 1972 in the Summit Series, but 76 Canada Cup was my very first big one. And I just remember thinking how cool it was to see Boreas Salming at Maple Leaf Gardens in the tray corner yellow and blue. And fans loved them. Fans just, how could you not? How could you not? And I still think of how horrific it was when Gerard Gallant he did stepped on his face in that Detroit game, and however many stitches he had all over his face. Hockey News put it on the cover. And he just kept coming back. You could not.
Perseverance is the word that I think of for him. Yeah,
that's a great one. All these things. That's the king, man. That's Boreas Salming, and we all become more tender people when there are more people like Boreas Salming around, and I think this weekend was a reminder of that.
Well, Jeff, listen, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. Everybody should catch him. Everybody knows where you are at this point, so it's all right. We'll always be watching and listening, and sorry you had to listen so much to Shane yesterday, but that's all right. It'll be okay.
I like Shane, dude, man. That guy is super legit, man. I'm so impressed at what he is.
I've watched him for 20 years kind of grow into this, so it's fun.
We get the occasional phone call and text from Shane, and needless to say, it turns into at least an hour-long session. If it's
Shane, if you're listening or watching right now, did I read that the way that you wrote it? Did I read that the way you wanted me to? And where do I send the invoice? Because we all know there's no I in team, but there's 2 I's in invoice. We all know that, right, gentlemen?
All right. Well, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
That's it for Off the Post.
We'll catch everybody next time.
Take care, everybody.